Flins is out, and it's safe to say that he's a great DPS. He's fun to play, has very impressive damage, and has a bunch of possible teams he can play in. But of course, you want to play him in the best. So after testing all of them, I'll share with you the best teams to play Flins in. So sit back, relax, hit the like button, and let's delve into Flin's absolute best team, which involves Ineffa, Sucrose, and the Hydroflex. You'll hear Ineffa thrown around a lot when it comes to Flins, and this is for good reason. First, from what we all likely know, Ineffa is highly valuable due to her incredible off-field damage. Her skill and burst are very powerful, but more importantly, Ineffa can perform her own lunar charge reactions. Given her high base damage, Ineffa can easily deal lunar charges that hit for 30k, 40 or even 50k. But Ineffa's strength don't simply rest in her personal damage. Ineffa acts as a broken buffer as well. Ineffa's passive directly buffs the lunar charges of her team, buffing Flin's lunar charges as well. This very thing applies to her signature polearm, which adds a further 40% increase to lunar charges. It's for this reason that Ineffa's inclusion dramatically changes Flin's teams. She will absolutely skyrocket the team's overall damage and outperform all other Electro supports by an insane margin. She's hands down Flin's best teammate. But while we can all start beating our chest for skipping Ineffa, he thankfully does not need her, and even better, we can then use his next best support that's way more accessible and teaches a very important lesson of Flin's: Sucrose. Sucrose is a must play in all of his teams to one, primarily shred the enemy's resistance towards Electro, but also to do what all other animal characters cannot. See, in the past, Sucrose was always outshined by other animal supports, and this had all to do with elemental damage bonus. This was, and still is, a game changer for a plethora of teams, but not for lunar charge teams. While still usable, this buff is nowhere near impactful as it once was, and this is because the main source of damage for lunar charge characters is the new lunar reactions they're dealing. Yet, elemental damage bonus does not improve these reactions, instead it only improves their personal damage. Therefore, characters actually able to improve the reaction themselves stand as significantly better supports, and this is exactly what Sucrose does. Like all reactions, lunar reactions scale on EM, and Sucrose directly increases her team's EM based on her own EM stat. All this added EM makes a major difference to Flin's lunar charge reactions. It will be massively stronger, but Sucrose does not just stop here. She can even act as a mini bandit if she has Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayer, adding another heap of damage gain towards Flin's in the form of attack. With these two pillars of Flin's support, you can complete the team with any Hydra character you want, like Yelan for her high damage and buff to Flin's personal damage, which again is not the main buff you want, but is certainly still something, or their C6 Candace to grant a similar buff but deal less damage. Now comes our second best team, and this is dedicated to all of us Ineffa-less players. Ironically, while lacking Ineffa locks us to one certain support, it also opens up a whole host of possible team setups that really complicate things, but I've gone ahead, tested them all, and here are the best ones. At the top is Aino, Fischl, and Sucrose. This team, while lacking his best support, is still remarkably strong. Flins will output very high lunar charge damage and finish enemies very quickly, and this is thanks to the two new additions of the team. Arguably the best of them is Aino. If you know anything about Aino, this comes as a huge shock since Aino's damage is next to nothing, and it's actually for this reason I haven't even leveled up her talents. But look at this, despite the fact that I have her under leveled, she is still an irreplaceable element in this team. This all stems from the Ascent Gleam mechanic. With Ascent Gleam, which activates when there's at least 2 Notcry units in your team, you get a whole bunch of huge benefits to Flins, like extra lunar charges from his burst, higher lunar charge damage, and even maxing out the buffs from his number 1 set. But if you don't have Ineffa, aside from Lauma, the only Notcry support to unlock Ascent Gleam is Aino. But to be frank, Aino does not deserve this merely Ascent Gleam enabler or last resort title. Aino is eons better than this, acting as a sort of second Sucrose to Flins. She can make exceptional use of the new Notcry support set, something you absolutely want to use, as it increases the incredibly important EM stat by 120 and also buffs lunar charges directly. Plus, if you get lucky, which I kinda did, let me know how your pulls went, Aino's constellations add further EM and lunar charge damage to Flin's. All of this amounts to Aino easily boosting Flin's lunar charges by around 34%, a major damage increase from this Hydro Munchkin. Next to Aino, another character you absolutely must play is Fischl. Fischl is so good, you want her in all of Flin's teams. Of all the team comps I tested, all the teams that included Fischl cleared much faster and were way smoother than the teams that lacked her, and this has everything to do with Fischl's high damage. Without her, you can actually feel the loss in damage, you feel the lack of a sub DPS, and beating enemies just takes so much longer, but when you sub her in, it's so nice. She just takes mere seconds to activate her abilities, but her damage is so apparent, especially with Flins around, since now with Flins, Fischl can inflict her own lunar charge damage. Fischl even generates a whole ton of electro particles that really lessen Flin's ER problems. I cannot recommend Fischl enough, but if you fancy her 5-star counterpart, as much as I wish this wasn't the case, I'd advise against this. Yae Miko's teams always performed far worse than Fischl's, and this stems from the fact that Yae's damage is either the same or just slightly higher than Fischl's, all the while taking way longer to cast. To really flex Yae Miko's 5-star muscles, then you're forced to utilize her burst, but this creates even more time off Flins, which is something you don't want to do. Though I'm sure most of us forgot, C6 Sara does exist, and on paper she looks amazing, granting higher attack and crit damage to Flins, but for my test this just did not work. I don't know why this was the case. This may have been because of Flins and Sara's rotations not working together, but overall you're better off not using her. Before we continue, I just ask that you take a quick second to like the video and possibly subscribe. This helps me out immensely and means a lot. But anyways, we've gone over Flin's non-Ineffa teams, and this aptly brings us to my preferred team, Flin's third best team. As great as the last one is, while you play it, you'll notice that Flins is extremely vulnerable in it. Though he's constantly moving around with all of his different attacks, it is all too easy for him to take damage and even die in fights. Therefore, you're pretty much required to run a healer in your team, and there's all sorts of healers that are great fits for him. My personal favorite is Jean. I for one am always up for an excuse to play more Jean, but at least in this setup, it's more than justified. Jean's healing, like always, is superb. She has no problem at all in healing your entire team with just one of her bursts. With her, you would literally never die, but moreover, with her Animo Vision, Jean can apply the shred of for Viridescent, so you retain some of the buffing that comes from Sucrose with infinitely more survivability. Now, some of you might be worried about Jean or really any other healer killing your team's DPS, but after I tested these runs and compared it to the other teams, there's really nothing to worry about. Yes, you do lose out on some damage, but most of it is retained if you play the healer right and have Fischl. For instance, with the Jean composition, it clocked out at just 3 seconds behind the last team, and this was all having to do with playing Jean correctly. To achieve such a clear time, always use Jean's skill, but save her burst only for emergencies. With no buffer to Jean in the setup, her damage is minor, thus you don't want to use her too much. On the other hand, an arguably better healer than Jean is Xilonen. While Shiloh's healing is certainly not as good as Jean's on all other fronts, it's hard not to think of Xilonen power creeping Jean. Shiloh inherently has Elemental Shred built into her kit, so just by herself alone, she can heal and reduce elemental resistances just like Jean. Then add on the set bonuses from artifacts and Shiloh does even more than Jean, the best choice of such sets being Noblesse Oblige or for Instructor if you can equip it. There's also Bennett and Dian-san, both of whom are strong with Flins. Bennett isn't talked about much, but Flins does scale off of attack, so he's more than viable with Flins. Alternatively, Yan-san's high movement requirement fits perfectly with Flin's special burst, and just like the other two healers, Noblesse or Instructor are their best sets. And crazily enough, even though each healer is different from each other and has their own various pros and cons, each of them came out to the same clear time. The sole healer that came out with a worse clear time was Kuki Shinobu. This does make sense since outside of the 4 tenacity I gave her, Kuki does not extend any buffs to Flins like the kits of all the other healers we just went over, so naturally her teams were quite a bit weaker, but regardless, she will solve any healer problems that arise in your teams. You could also throw away these healers and opt for shielders like, let's say, Lanyan with 4 Viridescent, or the Chad that no one talks about anymore, Zhongli with 4 tenacity. Well everyone, this is my team guide. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and be sure to ask me any questions you have on Flins. Thanks for watching.